everybody, welcome to this episode of the Budding Watch Enthusiast. Here on this channel, I review and discuss wristwatches from the perspective of a newer watch collector. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the red subscribe button and ringing the bell icon down below so you never miss a video that I post. Today, we're reviewing a brand that is probably going to be unfamiliar to many, even amongst the enthusiast community, because they're a smaller micro brand that produces watches in much more limited runs. And so today we're looking at the E.C. Andersson Calypso Sport. I have both the Calypso Sport Black and the Calypso Arctic Sport watch in here for review. The black watch is actually my own purchased E.C. Andersson watch, and then the Arctic is loaned in by my good buddy Ricardo from Watch With Us. So thank you, Ricardo, for letting me have this watch for a couple of weeks. Now, up front, I will mention that these are watches that unfortunately you cannot purchase new from E.C. Andersson anymore. Like I mentioned, E.C. Andersson is a Swedish micro brand that produces watches in very limited runs. They don't tend to produce more, at least they haven't yet with the few models that they've come out with. But the reasons that I'm still reviewing these anyway, despite that, is number one, they're watches that you can still buy on the secondary market, and a lot of folks have questions about them. Every time I see these mentioned, I always have people asking about them, whether it's on my post or other folks. The other reason, too, is because E.C. Andersson does have a few watches that are available to purchase from their website right now. Their Denise dive watch is available. They have a new watch that they're teasing that's coming out in the coming months called the Contra Gauss that they've been kind of laying breadcrumbs for on Instagram. So I figured that since there's not a ton of reviews out there on these watches, that this would also serve as a pretty good introduction to the E.C. Andersson brand as a whole. But let's start first by taking a look at the specifications for these two watches. So on both versions of the Calypso here, they come with a 316L stainless steel sandblasted case here. And that's going to be contrasted here by these very wide polished beveled edges that completely surround the side of the case. You also see the fixed polished bezel that offers some contrast as well. And this sandblasting offers a really smooth finish, a little bit less texture than you'd find on like a bead blasted case. If we flip the watch over, you see a polished screw down case back here that is decorated with the ECA logo. The watch does also sport a flat sapphire crystal that is anti-reflective coated. If we flip over to the side here, you do see this screw down crown that is engraved with the ECA logo as well. That's going to be a pretty common theme on this watch, just so you guys know. And this whole package here with this case gives you 100 meters of water resistance. If we're looking at the dimensions, we have a width of 40 millimeters, a lug-to-lug distance of 48 millimeters, a very svelte height of 10 millimeters, and then a strap width. We'll talk about the strap because that is a whole other discussion that we'll talk about once we get down to the bracelet. Now, the dial is where these two watches do absolutely diverge. And for being the same watch in the same watch family, the dials are actually quite different. So let's start by taking a look at the dial on the Arctic Sport first. So if we look here, it's a sand textured gray dial. That the dial also has anti-reflective coating as well, which is pretty interesting. The texturing on the dial is really subtle. I had to use a loop to actually even see the texturing on there. It looks, pretty matte and smooth. But even though you can't see the texture with the naked eye, for some reason I find this gray dial to be a bit more lively than other matte gray dials that I've seen, but it still retains that flat color. Now, both the hands and the hour markers on the watch are framed in polished steel. They're filled with BGW9 Super Luminova. That gives the lume blue glow that's very appropriate with the Arctic name of this watch. And the Arch Seconds hand that you see flying around there is a nice bold pop of color, but it doesn't dominate the entire watch. It just offers a very nice contrast. Of course, the markers on the watch are applied as you see here, going around with the double baton there at the 12 o'clock position. So if we move it over to the black dial, you see obviously a very different aesthetic here with this watch. So you see this textured black dial that is embossed with a repeating pattern of the E.C. Andersson logo. This is very reminiscent to me of the recent Grand Seiko 9F Quartz 25th anniversary watches that they put out. Some of them have this similar embossing with the Grand Seiko logo over it. Very, very cool looking and very unique. You're not going to find too many watches that do this. Now, the black version also has the same steel framed hour markers. It has the same steel framed hands that you see going around. But as you can see, the markers are a little bit smaller than they are on the white dialed version. And they're also a little bit more decorative because they kind of have that downward slope in towards the center of the dial where they taper off there. And so as you can see, since they are kind of sloping inward, as they reflect the light, they will kind of shine back at you, giving a little bit of a different look. And of course, here you see the seconds hand on this one, as opposed to the orange dial, is the same polished steel that you get on the other hands and the markers. Now, both versions do feature this dotted minute track that runs along the outer edge of the dial. That have Arabic numerals at each of the 5-minute markers that are very small but also very legible. The date cutout here at the 3 o'clock position has a light gray date wheel behind it that seems to match the color of the Arctic dial. The black version has the same background for the date wheel. And it looks like, again, under a loop, that it has the same texturing that you find on the Arctic version. Now, the real cool feature, and I had to zoom in for you guys to see it, is you see the rehaut that goes around the watch does have the laser etching or engraving of the E.C. Andersson logo all the way around, something that is not typically seen on watches at this price point. Of course, a very Rolex-esque maneuver there. And then as you see here, you have the E.C. Andersson logo and branding at the 12 o'clock spot on the watch. And then down at the 6 o'clock position, you get the water resistance, you get the automatic branding, and then the Göteborg, which I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of. That's the city in Sweden that the brand is located in, so that is called out on the dial as well. Inside of this watch beats the Miyota 90-15 movement, but the movement is regulated to fall between -3 and +9 seconds per day in accuracy, which is much more accurate than a typical stock Miyota movement will ship. And of course, the Miyota 90-15 features hacking, hand winding, a 42-hour power reserve, and it beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour. But now we kind of have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to the Calypso, and that is the strap option. So I glossed over the strap width earlier in the review. Technically, the strap width is going to be 12 millimeters because that's the distance that you have here between these broad lugs. But of course, this is kind of designed to be somewhat of an integrated solution for the E.C. Andersson Calypso. So basically, when it comes to getting this watch, you have 2 strap options. You have this H-link bracelet that you can get it on, and then you also have this flat black crocodile leather strap. So if we're looking at the bracelet here, the bracelet does have sand-blasted H-links that do taper pretty heavily. At the very top of the bracelet, it's 26 millimeters. It tapers all the way down to 18 millimeters in width. Now, of course, that's contrasted by these polished center links that run all the way down the middle of the bracelet. These meet each other in a butterfly clasp that is kind of cleverly branded with the E.C. Andersson logo, with one part of the logo on each side of the clasp. Pretty cool. Of course, the crocodile leather strap is going to give the watch a much different look. This is an unpadded strap, so it's going to be a very slim fit, which I like because it matches the slim profile of the watch as well. And this strap is going to be fastened by this pretty enormous tang buckle that has the E.C. Andersson branding on it as well, stamped into the buckle. And so here's what the E.C. Andersson Calypso Arctic Sport looks like on my 8-inch wrist and on the bracelet that is included with the watch. And then here's what the regular Calypso Sport is looking like on the crocodile leather strap that you're able to get with it. So let me start my review by saying that the E.C. Andersson Calypso Sport is one of the most well-constructed, premium quality micro-brand watches that I've ever had the pleasure of handling. I mean, this is just really up there just in terms of build quality, how it feels when it's in your hand, when it's on your wrist, just a ton of attention to detail just in terms of how the watch is designed, in terms of how it's laid out, some of the things that you're getting with this watch that you can't find in micro-brands that are in a similar price range. It's just a very, very impressive watch. It's pretty unique because the style and design are unlike too many other watches that I've seen out there. For me, the brand that it kind of evokes, at least in terms of construction and just in the general feeling of solidity that the watch has, would be Damasco. That's kind of the closest watch that I've ever personally used that is in sort of the same ballpark in terms of how these guys are constructed. And I find that kind of amusing because these are supposed to be designed to be tool watches. Like they have these blasted finishes that are, ideally supposed to hold up against, minor nicks and scratches and stuff like that. But they still have, all these polished surfaces on them, especially the black dial version here. Has this very decorative dial that kind of bucks that aesthetic. And speaking of the dial, that's really where it comes in for me with these watches. These happen to be two of my favorite dials that I've ever seen. And I really love that two watches that are in the same line, that are, pretty much the identical watch except for the dial, are so wildly different, because it would have been really easy to just kind of start with the Arctic dial and then make a black version of that without taking that extra step, to do the embossed pattern on the dial, to do the stainless steel handset, to change the markers around and things like that. And it's interesting because obviously the black dial is much more audacious. It makes much more of a statement, I think, when it's on your wrist. And then the Arctic dial is kind of the more conservative choice, almost the more wearable of the two, kind of on a daily basis. But this is one of the few watches that I've ever experienced that you can, if you really like this watch and you really dig it, you can make the argument to own both variants, because there's enough difference there. There's enough difference in feeling and how they wear that you can make the argument. And you guys know me, I won't even really buy two watches from the same brand usually, much less two of the same model watch. So if I'm saying that, that's a pretty big endorsement if I'm saying that both of these might be worth getting if you really enjoy this aesthetic. Now, the Arctic dial that I'm being loaned in, I thought in pictures was more white. I was really pleased when I saw it in person, finally, that it was much more of a gray color. And I've really grown smitten with this dial. Between this and the recently reviewed Winfield Mission Timer 1, which is a very different type of gray dial, it's really changed my perspective on gray dials as a whole, something I wasn't really a huge fan of to begin with. The other thing I really like about the Arctic Sport specifically is that just because of how the markers are laid out, just because of the general aesthetic of the watch, it really gives off some Rolex Oyster Perpetual vibes to me. Very classic looking design, but it's a very cool kind of modern update on such a design. And again, the thing that makes this watch, it's the little things, it's the little flourishes. It's, it's having this very unique case design on the watch. It's definitely, the rehots. Now, the bracelets are obviously going to be a huge sticking point. Now, the good news is that I really actually like the bracelets quite a bit. I like both strap options that come on the watch. The Angel Link bracelet is pretty cool. I think it looks very good. I do wish that it didn't have the polished center links, because obviously they're going to pick up a lot of nicks and a lot of scratches as time goes along. I would have preferred just doing fully blasted for the bracelet, but I understand why they went the way they did, because you're matching the aesthetic that the rest of the watch has. But it's a good bracelet. I typically don't like butterfly clasp bracelets, but this one has fit pretty well so far, which is nice to see. Shockingly, I really like the Crocodile Strap option as well. I'm not a guy that's going to typically wear a Crocodile Strap, and this is also definitely not a dress watch. So it's not a watch that you would imagine would work well paired with this strap, but for whatever reason, it really does. And especially if you're using this on the black dial version, because again, that strap is going to be just a little bit more audacious, just a little bit more attention grabbing, which is what the black dial version of the watch is doing in the first place. So that's the good news. At least the options that they come with are two very good options. Of course, the bad news is these are the only two options that you're going to have for this watch. So if you are someone that loves changing your watch straps, that likes to have variety, that enjoys being able to pair it with different looks, with different outfits, and usually use a strap to help coordinate that as well, it's going to be a deal breaker for you. You're not going to like this watch at all. Now, one thing that I was going to try to do with this watch is kind of fashion my own strap to see if maybe I can take a rubber strap or another leather strap and kind of cut it so that it can fit this link in here, this end link, because the link is detachable. You see this little post in here that just kind of screws it in place. So I guess you could make your own straps if you were handy enough to do such a thing. But it doesn't look like that EC Andersson is going to continue producing any more straps for this watch. So unfortunately, these two options are it unless you want to do some DIY work on your own. And again, some watch buyers might find that completely unacceptable. The good news is that the other watches in their line so far, the Nice Diver that's currently available, And we're not sure about the Conjure Gauss because we haven't seen it yet, but the Nice Diver does have a regular standard lug width. So it looks like kind of the integrated strap is more of a one-off for the Calypso rather than something that E.C. Andersson is doing as a whole. Now, there is one more really big negative to this watch, though, and that is that the crown might be one of the worst crowns that unfortunately I've ever had the displeasure of handling. So, it screws and unscrews just fine. It's got a screw down crown. It winds just fine. No problem. But anything beyond that kind of starts to get a little hinky. For whatever reason, I feel like that you have to apply more force to this crown to pull it out than any crown that I've ever used. And you see there, you pulled out, the minute hand kind of snaps around. When you turn it, now I think that this is whatever they're using to seal the crown, but it feels like that you're kind of turning against that, which is kind of weird. And then for whatever reason, the Calypso Sport is one of the most difficult watches to kind of pull the crown out just into that first date setting position. And even when you turn the date, like sometimes it kind of slips out of that position, kind of slips back very easily into the winding position. It's just really weird. I don't know why the crown is so wonky on this watch. And again, it's not a problem with this specific Calypso Sport because I have the same issues with the black dial version as well. I don't know if that's the case with the other E.C. Andersson watches that come out, but the crown is definitely a disappointment. Not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. It's just really annoying. Now, just to give you an idea on pricing for ECA, when it was available, the Calypso Sport is 591 euros on leather, 665 euros on the bracelet, and 711 euros if you get it with both, which translates to about $785 under whatever the current exchange rates are right now. And again, it's hard to really describe the quality just from doing this on a video. I'm hoping that you guys are able to see it as best as you can. But again, these are among the finest constructed micro brand watches that I have seen before. It definitely lives up to the price point of being able to pay, $785 to get both strap options for sure. And if you like the leather strap, well, 591 euros, I think translates to around $650. That's a fantastic price point for this watch. So the Calypso Sport, I think, is a fantastic watch. It definitely has its quirks, and it's definitely not going to be for everybody, but I think they're pretty cool. More importantly, I think that E.C. Andersson is a brand that should be on your radar, especially if you're a micro brand fan. I would definitely kind of look into them and learn more about them. I'm very interested to see what this new Contra Gauss watch is that they have been teasing. So we'll see later on what that's going to be. But I hope you guys appreciated this look at the Calypso Sport. Again, I know it's not a watch that you can run out and buy right now, but as an introduction, at least, to the E.C. Andersson brand, I hope you thought that it was informative. So guys, that's going to do it for my review of the E.C. Andersson Calypso Sport. Let me know what you thought of the review in the comments down below. If you guys enjoyed the video, click the thumb button. If you loved it, click the red subscribe button and ring the bell icon. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you all the next time.